We're getting a clear demarcation here between traditional yogic practices and the yoga of self-enquiry. And along with traditional yogic practices, we can understand all spiritual practices, all spiritual and religious practices. And these are in contrast to direct knowledge. Direct knowledge is liberation. This direct knowledge can be practiced. It's a spiritual practice. Anything else is, at best, spiritual seeking or mental development. There's nothing wrong with doing yogic practices. They're no more right or wrong than going to the gym or any other kind of activity which you pursue for a certain end. And there's no doubt that yogic practices probably are very good for achieving higher states of consciousness, for training the mind. Maybe you can even develop supernormal powers from them. But all that's got nothing to do with spiritual realization. The Brahmana, Chudala, said, "I once asked my grandfather," that will be the creator god Brahma, "which is superior, Kriya, action, the practice of a technique, or Jnana, self-knowledge?" So self-knowledge is self-realization. Kriya is the practice of yogic methods. And he said to me, "Indeed, Jnana is supreme, for through Jnana one realizes the one which alone is. On the other hand, Kriya has been described in colourful terms as a pastime. If one does not have Jnana, then one clings to Kriya. If one does not have good clothes to wear, he clings to the sack." It's sometimes couched in terms that, well, if you haven't got any realization or direct realization, you might as well get on with your religious and spiritual practice, as if these are some kind of substitute. They're not a substitute. They're completely different. Anybody can achieve self-realization. You don't have to be a special sort of person. You don't have to be particularly smart. You don't have to be particularly virtuous even. All you have to do is turn the attention to itself and consider what you've actually done or what's actually happened. But if you're not inclined to do that or don't know how to do that, then there's no reason why you shouldn't get on with anything else. The ignorant are trapped by the fruits of their actions on account of their conditioning, vasana. This is our identification with who we are, and then we have to bolster up that identification. We have to feed our notions of who we are by performing certain actions, by behaving in certain ways. This is our conditioning. When the latter is given up, action becomes no action, whether it is conventionally regarded as good or evil. In the absence of self-limitation or volition, actions do not bear fruit. The fruit would be further reinforcement of the ego and the motivation to continue doing that. The self-limitation is identifying with the ego personality. Actions by themselves do not generate reaction or fruit. It is the vasana or the volition that makes action bear fruit. Just as the frightened boy thinks of a ghost and sees a ghost, the ignorant man entertains the notion of sorrow and suffers sorrow. So if you've got a notion about who you are and the sort of world you're living in, you act in accordance with that notion. You reinforce that notion. That notion and the reinforcement of that notion will either be successful or not, will either lead to sorrow or not, happiness or not. It will be temporary happiness. Neither the vasana, self-limitation or conditioning, nor the ego sense is a real entity. They're notions They arise because of foolishness. When this foolishness is abandoned, there is the realization that all this is Brahman, and there is no self-limitation. When there is vasana, there is mind. When the vasana ceases in the mind, there is self-knowledge. When one who has attained self-knowledge is not born. There seems to be a causal chain here, that you have to give up your conditioning before you realize the self. But it can happen in an instant. This has been pointed out often enough. It's like stormy weather. The weather might seem to be terrible a lot of the time, but there's still the occasional glimpse of sunlight. You take the opportunity when it arises. If you're totally caught up in your moods, in your notions, I say notions, but really we're talking about our moods, our emotions. That's what we're caught up in. These are our vasanas. These are what we're identifying with. I say we've got a notion about ourselves, but it's a powerful sense of our own identity, either as a powerful individual or as a victim of some sort, or whatever. That's what we're hanging on to. But these can relax, even when we're falling asleep or listening to some music. Things change. Going out for a run. Our emotions are changing all the time. So it's not a question about stilling these emotions before realization is possible. It's about spotting the gap and taking the opportunity. Thus, one who has attained self-knowledge is not born. And this means that the ego personality is falling away. We get caught up in it less and less. In this sense, one who has attained self-knowledge is not born. Thus, even the gods, Brahma and others, have declared that self-knowledge alone is supreme. Why then do you remain ignorant? Why do you think this is the kamandalu and this is the stick, and remain immersed in ignorance? The kamandalu is his water pot, and the stick will be his walking stick. He's making that distinction. He puts a lot of attachment on these things, and this creates the whole world appearance. Why do you not inquire, who am I? How has this world arisen? And how does all this cease? Why do you not reach the state of the enlightened by inquiring into the nature of bondage and liberation? Why are you wasting your life in these futile austerities and other kriyas? It is by resorting to the company of holy ones, by serving them and inquiring of them, that you will attain self-knowledge. The company of holy ones helps you immerse yourself in this practice. It's very difficult just to do it alone, unless you've got a powerful realization. You have to keep coming back to it. You have to keep being reminded, self-remembering.